Hi, I'm Greg. This is Take It EV podcast. Welcome to the episode 38. Take It EV is a podcast about electric cars and sustainability and sustainable lifestyle. In today's discussion, we're going to have a conversation with Quentin Willson, who's a motoring journalist here in Britain. I don't want to delay this anymore, but I would like to thank from all my patrons who support this endeavor. And if you enjoy this conversation, please don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all that stuff. And also, check out the stuff in the description. We've got merch and some other cool things. And lastly, if you're on Twitter, follow me at TakeItEV, where all the cool conversation happens in between the episodes. Now, on with the show. Welcome to Take It EV podcast. I'm sure people know you, but can you just, for people overseas, can you just remind people who you are and why why we're talking?
Okay, I'm Quentin Willson, a motoring journalist and broadcaster who's been campaigning for electric cars for probably 12, 13 years and was driving them back in the day in 2009, 2010 when they were completely miserable little things.
Okay, and you've obviously, like you said, you've been involved in motoring journalism for a very long time. You mentioned that you've been involved in the EVs. I think the earliest I've seen you was it an Mitsubishi IMF or similar. I think I've seen a YouTube video where you were reviewing it. What can you talk about, like, because obviously you've been involved in motoring journalism way before the sort of the early EVs, on this side of 2000s. Can you tell us, like, what attracted you to EVs? Like, what, there's a lot of people who are car people, but they've kind of been resisting it for a very long time, and you've been kind of an early adopter.
So yeah, the moment, and I can clearly remember it, Greg, was driving down Sunset Boulevard in LA, filming for Top Gear. I presented that program for 15 years next to Clarkson, and it was in GM's fabled EV1, and I was one of the first UK journalists, if not the first UK journalist to drive it. And GM lent it to us, and I was a little bit skeptical, like everybody else, but it was a moment where I just thought, my goodness, this is fast, this is quiet, this is futuristic, this is pretty, and it had everything, and the whole crew were bowled over by it as well. And then I drew up to the traffic lights, having lost the filming car in the traffic, and there was a guy in a Volvo T5 next to me, and he looked over me. He was smug with his Oakley sunglasses and just kind of scorned. And then the lights changed, and I nailed it, and it just flew. And I'd never sort of seen that or felt that sort of crazy acceleration before. And of course, he was just toast. And I thought, well, this is it. This is the future. And I recorded a piece to camera not long after that, saying, one day we'll be driving cars like this. And here we are, in 20 years later. I think that was 97, 98, and it's all come true. The fact that GM crushed all those EV1s, which is now a matter of history, and they didn't want to sell them to people or lease them or continue the leases that people had on them, and they literally took them all away. If you ever want to watch the Who Killed the Electric Car, it's a really fascinating film and tells this story, and it shows you that back then GM knew that what they'd created accidentally was better than the cars they were making or would make for the next 20 years. So they wanted them gone. So it's a really, really kind of symbolic piece of cinema that you look there and you think, wow. And then the hydrogen industry got involved, and they persuaded the Californian Air Resources Board to go with hydrogen rather than electrification. And the rest is history. So that was my Damascene moment, Greg.
Why do you think? Yeah, I had one of the episodes in the past where I talked about, as a teenager or young man, I was watching. I think there was a program called Beyond 2000s, which is an Australian program, and they were reviewing all sorts of future technologies. I don't know what would be the equivalent in the UK, but the one of the things that they were saying, in early 19 90s is that hydrogen is going to be the future. We're all going to be driving cars that just produce water. So it was as a sort of byproduct of driving. And I do wonder what, why companies like GM would be afraid of EVs. I mean, to us nowadays it sounds a bit silly that they did that, but what was your feeling at the time? Why did they do it?
Well, it's a disruptive technology, and if you're a large car manufacturer with a global footprint, and you've got all these factories making engines, and this this completely hydrocarbon dominated business plan, which will stretch, for 20 years into the future, to then suddenly to have your engineers telling you, "Whoa, this is a great car. We need to completely change direction, and we need to make these, and we'll be the market leader." The old guard in GM would not have liked that. And in a culture in America where obviously the internal combustion engine and cheap gasoline then was such a driver, it would have been, when you think about it, would be completely disruptive for GM in all its markets. So I guess, if we're practical businessmen, that would have been a step too far. But they were just ahead of the game, absolutely massively ahead of the game. And I think probably even if they produced it, it would have been really difficult for them. But they should have pioneered it and carried on and been on that hill, that moral high ground that said that we're a combustion car manufacturer, but we're also looking at alternative technologies. And here's one we've made that has worked. And instead of having all those wonderful kind of plaudits and laurel leaves, they have been kind of vilified as the company that killed the electric car. And it's so sad because it cost them £1 billion, Greg, that car. Really huge amount of money. Back then it was Titanic, and they just swept it away because of a board of directors who were just old school. And
Yeah.
you still see that now. I mean, there are lots of car makers out there. Let's make no mistake about it, who really don't want electrification, and they're doing it simply because of the government targets. But if you talk to them candidly, they want to carry on building diesels. They've got all these factories and all this investment, and it's technology they know, where they don't know about batteries and battery packs and range and BMS and cooling and thermal runaway. They're only just learning that now. So they're finding this really, really tricky. And making margins on electric cars isn't as easy because obviously with combustion cars, they know how the business works, and they know they can make sometimes 20-30% on an SUV. So they're making all the encouraging noises, but there are certainly people in boards of big blue chip car companies who have said to me, "No, this isn't the future." In fact, one guy who I shall not mention, I'll spare his blushes, and it's a UK car manufacturer. He said to me on many occasions, "Look, nobody wants electric cars. They really, really don't. Who wants an electric Range Rover?" Well, lots of people actually. Look at the
I
Tesla Model Y.
Yeah, exactly. And ID4s and all these other big SUVs that
Yeah,
are electric. Audi,
e-tron.
what
Yeah,
e-tron, and I
Q7.
was
Yeah,
yeah. It's just that's, people just want them. Like I think Model Y actually sells better now than Model 3
yeah.
because it's bigger. So
I've ordered one because it's so great, and you put it next to a Range Rover, and you think, actually, this is better because it's got more space inside, and it's faster, and it's quieter, and it'll cost you so much less, and it won't depreciate. And I think the takeaway from all this, Greg, is that consumers who all the car makers thought didn't want this technology, we know they now do. The vast majority of people, if they could afford it, would give up their combustion car and have an electric car.
indeed,
And that's good. And it's happened with such speed and pace over the last 3 or 4 years. While people like you and me have been talking about this, we've seen such an exponential rise in sales of electric cars that it's only being kind of halted by availability. Elon Musk says he may have to stop taking orders because he can't fulfill the demand.
yeah, that's true. So given all this, this is one of the challenges that we have. But what do you think are the sort of other challenges in the fast sort of BEV transition? And uh, uh, you know, obviously people want them, but do you think there's any other reasons why we're struggling to make this transition? Obviously, if companies like GM have you know kept on producing cars like EV1, we would have been way ahead of the curve already. Like we would have been, this whole discussion wouldn't probably happened. We have already been driving BEVs, 10 years ago. But what do you think is still a major challenge now?
It's infrastructure really and cost. Those are the two barriers. We've replaced range anxiety with charging anxiety, and we all want to know where that charger is, and when we get there, will it work? Then there's the cost of EVs. I mean, they are more expensive in terms of upfront cost. We now know that over, say, 4 years, they're significantly less than combustion cars to own because of the low depreciation and the lack of maintenance and the cost of electricity. So the problem for me, and some of your listeners should know that I founded a campaign called Fair Charge, which is to increase the understanding of EVs and to keep charging costs down and to hold the government's feet to the fire to make sure they produce a decent infrastructure. But the big problem for me is that we now have a situation, and I'm sure this is the same in other countries, where the electric car is effectively a middle class thing because middle class people can afford a 50 grand Tesla and a 35 grand, 40 grand Leaf. But the £15,000 or the £20,000 electric car is a way off. And I'm not including all those little cars you buy in China because I don't think they would pass the crash tests here. And I don't think we need to have lots of cheap electric cars from China. We need to build our own. So the problem here is that you've got the haves and the have-nots, and I think that's a real problem. And I want to make sure that zero emission motoring is something that everybody can have. So we need to pressure the government to look into this, and they won't be able to build electric cars, and neither will the car makers. But what we should look at is maybe there is some sort of interest-free loan system as they have in Scotland, where you can be helped to buy an electric car, and with the rising residual prices of them, this isn't an asset that depreciates. So you could probably use that profit on the asset over time to subsidize some sort of loan thing. But this is really, really important. Otherwise, we'll have a class division when it comes to electric cars, and that helps nobody. So we've got to do that. I'm also campaigning in the UK. We have this ridiculous situation where if you charge your car on a public charger, you have to pay 20% VAT compared to 5% if you're charging at home. Now, this is an old piece of tax legislation that was around when electric cars were just a twinkle in Elon Musk's eyes. So this needs changing, but getting the Treasury in the UK to change is like pushing the Albert Memorial. It takes a long time, but we're on it, and we've got the Treasury mandarins scratching their chins and saying, really? Okay. But and I mean, it's a battle I will win. But things like that, they disincentivize people from making the shift to electric cars. So, certainly in the UK, we've got wide adoption. You drive down any motorway and there are just so many cars. And I used to count Teslas on the way to school with my kids, and we'd get into double figures. Now you couldn't do that because you'd be looking at so many cars you'd crash. So that adoption has been really incredibly high, and it's nearly 20% of the market now, but it's still only 1.2, 1.3% of the total global market in the UK. So we've still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I sometimes say to people that the reason you see so many Model 3s is because people want them. They can lease them very cheaply, and when they order it today, they can get it in 3 months. Whereas if you go to any other car manufacturer, you're going to wait 12 plus months. Every time I said I currently drive a Kia e-Niro. Every time I go to the garage to do anything, and I listen to the salesman, the first thing that they say to people, there's people going through the doors and asking, first thing they say, they want an electric car. And he says, but we can't deliver it in 12 months, but you can have this brilliant hybrid. And I wonder if car manufacturers made a mistake, deliberate or not, and didn't prepare themselves for all the demand. And Tesla's just eating their breakfast now, or their lunch. I think it's breakfast because it's early. Pardon the not the pun, the creative phrase there. But I'm glad that somebody like yourself, with a lot of experience basically in the industry, pushes this, because I wish there was more journalists, motoring journalists, actually being as proactive as yourself. But do you think there's so you've been reporting on cars, as your main job in life for a very long time, but has there been anything bugging you as a thing that isn't done by other people who should have been working towards this goal as part of their life, as a sort of the journalist life? You mentioned the Fair Charge UK, but is there anything else that journalists could do now? We see a lot of what I'm trying to allude to is there's a lot of negativity in press because obviously it sells. Do you think they're doing as a favor, or is it are those criticisms fair, or is it just is it hindering the adoption?
I think there's a lot of negativity, and more so than there was when I was driving around in my little IMEV and Citroen C0 and Zoe and Leaf. They kind of smiled indulgently and said, "Well, he's a bit mad, isn't he?" And I would get invited on radio shows and things, ostensibly to talk about electric cars, and then you find out you were there just so they could take the mickey out of you. And this man from Top Gear who loved all these fast cars has suddenly become a tree hugger and eating muesli for breakfast and wearing open-toed sandals. So I was the kind of the butt of ridicule for quite a while. And I think the question is a good one, that there is a lot that the general press could do, and particularly the motoring press, although they have raised their game quite recently. But it's clickbait, isn't it, Greg? In the sense that it's much better to write a story that says that we're going to run out of lithium and cobalt and nobody's going to be able to build batteries and things like that, than to say, electric cars are great and they're the future and we should all buy one. That kind of apocalyptic narrative in a lot of press is what sells, ads and newspapers and news sites. So it's a great shame. I think there's also another problem, is that not enough people in the motoring press and the general media have driven an electric car or owned an electric car. Once you have that Damascene moment, and you'll remember it from the first time you drove an electric car, you just think this is it. There is no turning back. I will never buy another combustion car again unless it's maybe a classic or something. And I think there are lots of people who like to think they're commentators, but have not done as I've done, which is probably 70 to 100,000 miles in a battery-only car. That's a lot of charging. That's a lot of hanging around. That's a lot of working out your range and stuff like that. But once you've done it, you have a set of experiences that entitles you to be able to talk really knowledgeably on the subject. And unless you've done that, you fall into all the traps of, this is no good and the batteries don't last and you can't use them in the rain, and all the batteries are going to go into landfill and they catch fire, and this long litany of absolute moonshine that is being propagated by people who just don't want change. And you take the diesel out of their cold dead hands. And I think we could all, as journalists and opinion formers, do more to get rid of all these urban myths and misconceptions and downright crap, really.
Yeah, I think speaking of Top Gear, like, people should do something exciting like that, but about fast or fun when it comes to driving electric cars. I think that will sell better than negativity that people are kind of chasing. And I'm personally kind of annoyed with the young creators on YouTube and whatnot. These days, they test drive a car for 15 minutes and then they present it as if they owned it for a while, and it's just predictable and kind of boring. Or they go to the other extreme where they complain about electric cars. And I wish there was the good old journalism done when it comes to electric cars. That's my personal view, obviously, but I was just wondering whether you agree with that.
I think it's interesting because you would think that there would be an electric car show, and tomorrow's cars or cars of the future or something like that. And I pitched this to loads of broadcasters, and the problem is a lot of them just don't drive at all, and they're interested in dating shows and antiques and gardening and sort of the usual, predictable televisual fare, and nobody really wants to do an electric car show, when you would have thought that this would be really, really fascinating to a large, congregation of people.
Yeah.
But that's television, and television has always been like that. It's always a bit behind the curve. But I think the fact that program doesn't exist is really symbolic of the fact that the media isn't interested, and it should be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have obviously the fully charged show, which that's the way to go these days. It seems like you have to create your own show and produce it yourself, which is obviously much
Yeah, I
more
mean,
expensive and
fully
involved.
charged should be on broadcast terrestrial or satellite television. The fact that
Indeed.
it has to be on YouTube with such meteoric success and a million followers, it's kind of testament to what's wrong. You would have thought someone would have snapped Robert up and said, "Right, let's give you a proper show," but they haven't, and I think that's really really telling. So we could, as a society, really start to understand. And look, it's not about you should drive an electric car because it's a good thing to do. The benefits of electric cars and the following electrification are just huge
Yeah,
in the sense that air quality in towns, energy security, lower energy costs. You drive more gently, more kind of in a considered way to save energy. But those batteries in those electric cars will then spawn other batteries that will power ships and light aviation and static energy storage. And that means that we can transition from a hydrocarbon economy and a hydrocarbon polluting fossil fuel world to this world of renewable energy. So the electric car is the first step in that journey, Greg. And it's so important. And I campaign a lot in Parliament and I talk to MPs and things. And you tell them this and they kind of, oh, really? And I think we really, really should be looking at this as a historic generational change where we can stop burning stuff and stop polluting the atmosphere and global warming and air quality and really start to generate clean, cheap, renewable power. I mean, renewables are the cheapest energy on earth. Why aren't we doing more of this? Why is I won't mention his name, a certain gardening presenter saying, I don't want, onshore wind farms. They're ugly and they're horrible. It's not about that. It's about energy security and making sure that what's happened over the last 5 months and Ukraine and Putin and oil and gas never happens again. That's the thing. So that's why electric cars are just so important. It's not a badge of rank and the little green number plates carve you out as somebody who's got a social conscience. It's about making sure we are no longer dependent on so much oil and gas.
yeah. I mean, I fully agree. I was kind of jokingly saying around the sort of the Brexit vote that one of the biggest independences that we should be backing, if any, is the energy independence. And obviously, people who were supporting that whole movement were that they are very big supporters of oil and gas and all that stuff. But it's to me that's ironic that when we talk about independence, we never talk about the energy dependency on Russia and China and other big monolithic countries that COVID that kind of showed us that that those dependencies are not good. And then obviously the Russia's invasion of Ukraine kind of just put a tick underneath that, and now we're kind of scrambling to get away from that. I fully agree. The one of the sort of the other positive thing that I've seen as part of the early adopters, and now I think we're no longer in the early adoption phase, but there's a resurgence of kind of car clubs where people meet up, just to talk about EVs. And obviously, you go to a lot of you go to conferences, not conferences, the what you would call like the fully charged show, and the what's the other one in Jaguar? No, it's not a factory. I can't remember what it's called. It's in Gaydon. The name kind of escaped me. But do you see that yourself? That there's more interest in like people meeting up and just discussing electric cars in person on local basis. Do you ever go to any meetups where you are?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great big EV community now,
Yeah.
and they all join up, and there's Tesla owners clubs and Leaf owners clubs, and there's the one you're talking about in Gaydon is an annual EV show in the car park of the British Motor Museum, and it's fantastic. And you've got all this eclectic bunch of people who aren't there for bragging rights. They're just there to talk about their EVs and about the range and about the battery life and all this sort of stuff. And it's not just Teslas; it's everything. And I was there, I think, the year before last, and there was a man with a Renault Fluence. I mean,
Yes, I
when have
remember.
you ever seen a Renault Fluence, Greg?
Yeah,
You
I think
know,
it's
and
it's called EV Festival. That's the name,
yeah, that's right.
or
Um,
Electric Festival, something like that.
for your listeners, the Fluence was a car made by Renault with a replaceable battery, wasn't it? And
Yes,
you
yeah.
take the battery out and put another one in. It didn't catch on, but the very fact that this guy was there proudly showing off this piece of EV motoring history was just great. I was gobsmacked by it. So
Yeah.
yes, there is this growing community, and if you look on the forums and on YouTube, it's huge. What we've got to be very careful is that doesn't become a fringe thing, and that there are lots of ordinary car drivers who go from their Fiestas and Astras and Corsas and buy electric cars and enjoy them and have the same levels of passion and enthusiasm. It's getting them to drive them. That's the big thing, because once you've driven one, and I would say 90% of the population has yet to do that, you get it. No amount of sales pitch, no amount of passionate evangelism from people like you and me does the same as getting your backside in the car and just feeling that you are in a brave new world of modern technology, and that you're not going to turn back.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many people that I know who are very, very stubborn petrol heads who refuse to even drive passengers with me in a car, because they know once they kind of feel it, they want to create that firewall between their own world and the new reality. But so the world is, or the world's history is full of great inventions that people didn't end up adopting because one way or the other, politics
Vested interests.
or yeah, kind of one. And I'm still, I'm 44 almost, and I've grew, and I'm an engineer sort of by trade, so the cynicism in me is kind of in like I've just it's part of my experience in life and in in work life. And I'm still worried that there's going to be a chance that politicians or the industry is going to kind of screw it up, for the lack of better term. Are you worried that this is going to happen? Like, that people will adopt something like hydrogen or anything else just to kind of slow it down, or to stay and have their own, and fossil burning toys? Are you worried about that happening, or do you think we will succeed in this instance?
I think we've passed that point now, whereas, there are still people out there who are hanging on to the hydrogen dream. But as an engineer, you'll know that the cost of hydrogen is so much. The CO2 it produces is so much, if you talk about green hydrogen. And carbon capture, I mean, I don't think that's been proved at all. And the energy required to make hydrogen compared to electricity, what is it, 4 times?
Yep.
So for
Yeah.
passenger cars, it doesn't begin. I mean, I drove the Honda Clarity, and the Ford did a hydrogen Focus, and look, they were lovely and they filled up really, really, really quickly. But the cost, I mean, the Toyota Mirai, is that 80,000?
I think it's
And
60 now,
the
but
fact,
yeah, but still,
what is
there's
a
like,
huge amount of money, and
yes, yeah,
uh, the fact that there isn't a major motor manufacturer now that's actually pursuing a credible hydrogen policy is, I think, indicative of the fact that they've all got this and said, look, this isn't the technology. It might be for heavy goods vehicles or marine or stuff like that, but not for passenger cars. Um, my real anxiety is that politicians will roll back these green targets, which were set broadly by Boris Johnson. Now he's a troubled prime minister, and he may not last the course. And there is this Brexit scrutiny group of backbench right-wing MPs who don't believe in climate change and who don't believe that we should be doing this. And this cost to society of all these green policies is a price not worth paying. So they will, at the first opportunity, try and unpick all this legislation. Now, if you take away that 2030 moratorium on sales of new cars and vans and the 2035 on hybrids, then the manufacturer has no reason to stop building combustion cars, and they can carry on and they can stretch it to 2040, 2050, 2060, and we're knackered, and that great
yeah.
beatific vision of this world without pollution and without diesels rattling away, chucking out particulates, that could carry on indefinitely, and that's my biggest fear. So when I'm in the House of Commons talking to MPs with my fair charge hat on, it's really important, and we've got about, I think, 35 cross-party MPs and people in the House of Lords who are supporting us, and we need to get more to be able to say, if ever it comes to that vote in the House, we can say, no, we're not going to let that one through, because what we're talking about is our health and the health of our children and the health of their children. And it is, as I keep saying, this generational opportunity for energy transition away from polluting fossil fuels.
Yeah, I agree, and also I think it would be worth mentioning too, if you speak to MPs about what happened in Australia just recently with their vote. It's not a nobody puts it that way in a public media, but people that I listen to who are there in Australia have kind of clearly stated that the one of the sort of the backbench winners, or not, I don't know what would be the poetic way to put it, but people kind of put their money on the climate change and the fact that the leaders there were very much against, or were trying to stifle the progress, and backing coal and all that nasty stuff, and they lost massively. So I think we need this wave to kind of carry on and come over to the UK. And speaking of the as an engineer, I always remind people that the hydrogen cars are still electric cars with a tiny
Yeah.
range extending hydrogen fuel cell thingy. Yeah, and so we still need a battery, and we still need an electric car. How big you're going to make the fuel cell and the hydrogen tank can vary. And I agree with you. Like the physics says no about hydrogen. Like the hydrogen production is very expensive for a reason. It's just the physical property of it, and we can't change physics. That's just the law of nature. So I don't know why people are still thinking that they can somehow make by putting money into that industry, they can make a progress there, because I don't think it's possible physically. Somebody would have won a Nobel Prize if they were able to figure something out.
But we should try. I mean, look, I'm a great believer in parallel technologies, and if there is a hydrogen fuel cell that is small and that can produce, effectively green hydrogen that can power things, then let's keep going. Don't shut the door on that one. I mean, we might have said that about batteries, 10, 15 years ago, that they were too expensive, they didn't have enough power, and they didn't have enough range, which was broadly true. And it's only because people have been throwing billions of dollars and pounds at it that we've got the 2170 battery that is, the staple of all electric cars, pioneered by Tesla, and the 4680 now, which is also a fantastic battery with greater range and better cooling. So these have come out from research and development and investment. Now that might happen with hydrogen, so we shouldn't close the door.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Like we need, hydrogen obviously wins when it comes to the energy density. That's still a problem. That, again, physics, is just one of those things where you, as an engineer, when you look at it, you need to have areas where that's the only way you can either store the energy or transmit it. Speaking of, but I just have a feeling that the going back to the previous question that I had about other people kind of stifling the progress because of whatever reasons, I was gobsmacked basically when I was younger that nobody came up with a parallel hybrid, essentially, or serial hybrid, sorry, much earlier, and didn't push for it. Again, if you imagine a hydrogen car, but instead of the fuel cell, you just have a small a petrol motor that just drives a generator at certain RPMs, and then what is it? Is it the volt, which is the Vauxhall Ampera in the UK?
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, should have happened 10, 20 years ago, and all cars should be like that now. That would have been a sort of a logical thing to do. But again, industry somehow has been resisting this, and we now have the self-charging hybrids and all that sort of nonsense, which is essentially that. But in my opinion, about 20 years too late. And I'm still worried that this, somebody will try to tweak it and make it make the adoption not happen in time, and by 2030.
I had a Vauxhall Ampera. It was great.
Okay.
I ran it for a year. It was fantastic. I used to get 195 miles to the gallon. And it was really, really, really a clever car. And
Yeah.
there's another instance of GM sort of because they just killed it off.
Yeah.
And you just think, why? Because it works so well. But again, it was a car that they really didn't want to sell. It's what we call now compliance cars that
Yes.
were made because it got their CO2 down and it got them credits, and the EU were happier if they did that. But they didn't really want to make these cars. The irony is that when they did make them, they made them really well. And here's another thing. That all those Gen 1 electric cars, so going right back to the little IMEVs and even the G Whizzes and the 24 kilowatt Leafs, those batteries have lasted. They really, really have. And you talk to many in the battery recycling industry, and they say, well, when the batteries come, we'll recycle them, and they're still waiting. And you're finding now that the lithium-ion battery pack, certainly in lots of Teslas, is outlasting the chassis of the car. And that's a really interesting thing, that they over-engineered these batteries in the early days to make sure we didn't have failure rates and we didn't have thermal runaway. And what's happened is that if somebody says to me, what about all these batteries that are going to go to landfill? And you look at them and you say, are you nuts? Look on eBay, and the price of a 24 kilowatt battery from a crashed Leaf is probably $5,000. And then if you want a secondhand battery pack for a Tesla Model 3, it's $10,000, because these things still work and they can be put into other applications and stuff like that. So that's really interesting that, everybody predicted that you would need a new battery every 3 or 4 years. So it was even the industry guides, glasses guides and caps. I remember reading them, and this new wave of electric cars, they shook their heads glumly and they said, well, they're going to depreciate like Steinways thrown from tower blocks because of the batteries. Well, mate, you were wrong, and you were seriously wrong, because here we are 10 years later and these cars are still happily running around. All people want is more range, and Robert Llewellyn's got this 24 kilowatt Leaf, and he's put a new battery pack in it, and gets 150, 175. So look, it's another piece of misinformation and urban nonsense that just has been robustly disproved.
Yeah, you're quite right. Like, I would love to be able to, if people were throwing away, quote unquote, the batteries from 24, 30 kilowatt hour Leafs after 2-3 years, I would gladly buy one and put it on the wall behind my house to have the storage.
Yeah, completely. And that's what's going to happen. Yeah, you're going to get energy storage produced from second life batteries.
Yeah, but if indeed it was so many of them were thrown out, you could just, like you say, go on eBay and buy one for a couple grand, and it would be easy. It isn't, it's just not, because there's so much demand, and the prices obviously go up. When it comes to the fair charge that you mentioned before, is that something that other people can kind of help you with, or is, I'm just trying to see if there's anything we can do, like the community at large, basically, or is that something?
Look, anybody who is interested in electric cars and electrification and cleaning our air, sign up to Fair Charge. So our website is www.faircharge.co.uk, and we're on Twitter @FairChargeUK. And just join us. We've got a supporters page. We can tell you how to write to your MP. And trust me, because I did a petrol campaign for 11 years, Fair Fuel, which saved 120 billion on VAT and fuel duty rises. So we can have a really, really, really great effect. The more letters that go to the MPs, the more they realise that they should be thinking about electrification. And if their constituents want more chargers, they want cheaper rates, they want more transparency and visibility, then they'll listen. So it's faircharge.co.uk and @fairchargeuk on Twitter.
And of course because that's the one of the, when I mentioned that campaign to somebody recently, they asked me if it has anything to do with the Fair Fuel campaign. And obviously, it doesn't.
No, I mean, I think it's really good for your listeners to understand what happened. So I did that for 11 years. So we started in, was it 2010, campaigning for a moratorium on fuel duty because Alistair Darling, the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, wanted to have fuel duty fixed to the cost of living. So every budget it would go up by a certain percentage. And I said at the time, and this was David Cameron was Prime Minister, this is going to really decimate working class families and people who have to use cars. And he, luckily, he agreed with me and he chopped a penny off fuel duty and said, we are the party that reduces fuel duty. And every budget we would bombard the Treasury and MPs with emails saying, look, don't put up duty in this budget, and it worked. But all the time I was driving electric cars as well as combustion cars because I thought, look, if I'm the car man and the petrol man, I need to look at this new technology, and it worked. And I got to a stage when I bought a Tesla Model 3 a couple of years ago when I thought we actually don't need to be promoting petrol and subsidizing petrol. So I walked away from fair fuel after such a long time because it wasn't the right thing to do. You can't promote both. So, and I'm glad I did. And then I started up Fair Charge. So for everybody's peace of mind, I no longer have anything to do with fair fuel, which has become really quite right wing and very anti EV and very anti climate change. And I want nothing more to do with it.
Fair enough. And obviously, the way they kind of behave is a sign of them being desperate, basically not having anything else to cling on to. And thank you for explaining it, because when I said that I'm going to talk to you, that's one of the main sort of things that I've heard from people that they would like to hear more about. And
okay, well, maybe I should do another interview about it because it's very important that it's clear that I no longer want subsidies for fossil fuels. And it's about this new technology which works, and that's the point that we can now drive. If you can afford them, we can drive electric cars and get 320 miles to one charge.
Yeah, and obviously, you've got experience in talking to politicians about it, which is obviously very much appreciated, and I'm happy that you're on sort of quote unquote on our side of things.
Well,
having
good.
somebody with experience is good.
It was a very conscious decision that I thought this is important. We have to do this because if I don't, there aren't really many other voices. There's just Robert. And Robert and I collected our Mitsubishi iMIEVs at exactly the same time in Birmingham back in 2010 and went our different ways. But we've kind of come back together and he's done an awful lot of work and so have I. And it's sad that, we're probably the only two journalists in the UK over that decade who had the kind of clout and the resolve to be able to promote this and to change people's opinions. I think that's also very telling.
No, yeah. Going back to batteries, is British Volt something you're involved in as well?
Yeah, British Volt came to me and said, "Look, we're making a battery factory up in Blyth, and we'd like you to advise us on EVs and what the consumer wants when it comes to electric cars and particularly batteries and range and cost and charging times and all that sort of thing." So I do consultancy work for them and advise them on what is the best kind of combination of battery density and range and how long people want to charge for and what's acceptable and what isn't. And they're really great because they allow me into the kind of inner world of battery tech. And I go to lots of labs and things and talk to electrochemical engineers and things. And I was down at Imperial College in London the other day and then up at the Warwick Manufacturing Group at Warwick University, seeing this new technology and how they really are developing these batteries at a huge, huge speed. And literally the technology is changing day by day. And that's why they're building this factory up in Northumberland in 4 stages, because if you built it all at once, the technology would change so fast that the bit you built and on the machines you bought would be redundant. So they're doing that. And the idea is to, and I think they're probably world leading at this stage because they really are, pushing the boundaries and looking at silicon anodes and reducing cobalt and LFP and all these alternative materials that aren't critical minerals that we can get easily and we're not going to run out of, and learning how to manage heat, and manage cooling, and also make the battery part of the car in the sense that it can be a part of the chassis rather than being this platform you just put at the bottom, or worse still, being part of a car that was actually designed for a combustion engine and you just put the batteries in as an afterthought. And then they're also working on recycling, how you make a battery much easier to recycle, because at the moment we put batteries through shredders and it gets out all the critical minerals in the form of black mass. But it'd be much easier if the battery just came to pieces to be recycled, virtually instantly with a few turns of a screwdriver. And those are the things they're pioneering. And I think pioneering is the right word, because the lithium-ion battery has been around for quite a while, but broadly speaking, it hasn't really changed that much. And it's only recently that we've got people like Tesla going for the 4680, which is a larger, fatter battery with greater density, that you don't need so much of. I mean, there are 4,600 cylindrical batteries in a Tesla Model 3 in the battery pack. This is a 2170 battery. So I know all this stuff about batteries, and I've talked to all these electrochemists and things, because I've had access to that. And I think that's really important, because people like me, car journalists, we know about engines, and most people know about engines, but very few of us know about batteries. And that education is really, really important. And being allowed behind the magic curtain to talk to all these scientists about batteries, I think is really, really good, and it helps everybody understand. So part of my role in British Volt is also educating consumers about batteries and what to expect, and the fact that quite soon we will have solid state batteries, maybe 5-7 years, that have 700-800 mile ranges and that will last 1,000,000 miles. And that technology is close enough to touch. And I think that's really good. And it's different from being aligned to a car manufacturer, because if you are aligned to one particular car manufacturer, it makes it quite difficult. You can't really be independent. But with batteries, it's different. And batteries they're going to be great for everybody. And if we can start designing batteries, big, solid state, standalone, static energy batteries that can power businesses, towns, cities, then that's great. And that's exactly what Musk is doing. And he's done it in California and he's done it in Australia, where he has these big battery energy storage units which stop all the power outages. And eventually you'll be able to run that on renewable electricity, on solar, and it will be able to power whole towns and communities. So socially, I think that battery piece is really, really important, and I'm really privileged that they've allowed me to, as a journalist, to listen to all these chemists and hear what they're doing.
And obviously, that when you talk to politicians and other people, that kind of gives you an insight from the other perspective. You can't just say, "I've heard this and that," but you have some backing, which is always great.
And to tell politicians that, look, this is about highly paid, highly skilled jobs in a new industry that we can create. We can no longer carry on building combustion engines, wearing them out, and then building them back again. I mean, it's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
And all that friction, all that oil, and all that smoke, and all that carbon, it's got to go. So understanding that the batteries, that without energy batteries, there will be no energy transition. And you've got to get politicians to understand that supporting companies like British Volt, and there's going to be another battery factory, hopefully in Coventry, and Northvolt and things like that, it's very, very good for society at large. And you've got to take this long-term view beyond an electoral cycle and say that this is for us, and it's for our children and their children and the generation after that. And if we don't do it, we will be unforgivably remiss, having wasted so much opportunities in the past with North Sea oil and North Sea gas, and we'd felt so comfortable about it. We really didn't develop this independent energy strategy. Well, now is the time to do that. So, I'm saying that, as I mentioned earlier on, that the battery is going to be critically important to our future and our reindustrialization.
Here. As a bonus question, because we're running out of time shortly. My father-in-law has contributed a question for me, and he basically said, if you could buy an electric car for Jeremy Clarkson, which electric car would you buy for him?
Okay, well, look,
I know it's
it
a
would
sort
be
of tongue-in-cheek question, but
not that he'd ever have one. I remember I would show him my Mitsubishi, and he would look at me and say, "You've been reading the Guardian, haven't you? You know, you've gone all soft and green on me, and with nothing but contempt." And then that contempt would translate into the items they did on Top Gear, where you remember they tested the Tesla Roadster
yeah.
and ragged it around the track, and then it supposedly ran out of juice, and they had to push it into the hangar, and that was nonsense. That was just for the cameras. So I would say to Clarkson, get a Model S Plaid, Tesla Model S Plaid, which does 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds, and then tell me that electric cars aren't exciting, that electric cars are for tree huggers, and electric cars are no good. So that's the question. That's the car I'd offer him.
Okay, I still remember the episode where he raved about Model X and had lawyers in the back. I don't know if you've watched that, but I thought that was
Well,
quite
yeah,
funny.
yeah, yeah. That was because Elon Musk got very, very cross with him, and that's another story that I probably can't tell you on air. But he didn't like it at all. Quite
I'm
rightly
sure.
so, I have to add.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I always said to people that Top Gear is a or with Clarkson was a kind of show, entertainment show more than a car show, basically. And anybody else who thought they got a good information out of it should be rethinking their choices of information sources. That's all the questions that I have for you. And again, I'm conscious of time, so thank
Not at all. And a pleasure, Greg. I'm Quentin Willson, and this is Take It EV podcast. If you're interested in electric cars, you need to listen.